I was born here in Taiwan, and then when I was 5, we moved to New Zealand. I didn't go to preschool.
Oh, okay.
I didn't go to kindergarten, so they just like threw me in there. I cried every day. And like my grandfather told me, because he came with us in the early days when we were settling in, and he told me that when he held my hand, I was just like shaking. At a talent show at school, I saw this girl dance. I was like, I want to do that.
Wow.
And I went home, and this was when we had yellow pages. And then so I found the school, I called up the school director.
This is you on your own.
Yeah. She was wondering, who's this little girl? Like, hello, I want to do
That's
ballet
so cute.
classes.
Cole Fogel, and today I am with, I'll just let you introduce yourself.
My name is Kate Tien.
Where are you from originally?
I was born here in Taiwan, and then when I was 5, we moved to New Zealand, and then I grew up there, like up until I was like 17. So the reason why we moved is because my grandfather just like said, you know, he made some investments in New Zealand, and then we just like got shipped away to New Zealand, and along with my cousins. But my uncle and his family, they went to the South Island, and we were in the North Island.
5-year-old moves to New Zealand.
Yes.
Probably pretty easy, I'm guessing, for you to get into that reality because you were so young.
I didn't go to preschool.
Oh, okay.
I didn't go to kindergarten, so they just like threw me into, we call it primary school, which is like elementary school here.
Grade 1 to 6.
My sisters were a bit older than me, so they actually like could speak a little bit of English. I didn't. So they just like threw me in there. I cried every day. And like my grandfather told me, because he came with us in the early days when we were settling in, and he told me that when he held my hand, I was just like shaking. I was shaking. It must be so traumatizing for a little kid.
I'm
Your
sure.
parents just toss you in this environment.
Yeah.
You can't understand anything. I actually met my childhood best friend there because she was also crying. So we bonded over the crying, and to this day, we're still friends.
You are a ballerina, or you were a ballerina at some point? Did that start in New Zealand?
Yes, so I was 10 years, so as a kid, I was always very active.
Okay.
Like just had so much energy. I did gymnastics for a day, did swimming lessons for a day. So I tried to do lots of things, and then at a talent show at school, I saw this girl dance. And it was some sort of like balletic piece, I guess. And I was just fixated. I was like, I want to do that. And then I went home. This was the time.
This is when you're 10?
Yeah, about 10.
Wow.
And I went home, and this was when we had yellow pages. Like, we had no Google. You had to like flip through a yellow book, and they had a directory of like, you know, alphabetically listed businesses. And then so I found the school. I called up the school director.
This is you on your own.
Yeah. I called up the school director, and she was wondering, who is this little girl? Like, hello, I want to do ballet classes. And then she told me when the times were, and then I dragged my mom to the local ballet store, picked out like the uniform. And so I did my first ballet class. Fortunately for me, I have decent facility for dance. So, you know, we stand very turned out. Everything's about turnout, and like my hips are just like kind of 180. Because you also have to have the
physique or the build.
Yeah, physique. And then plus all the discipline, all that stuff that also has to come as well. Actually, originally I wanted to be like a vet. And then my ballet teacher was like, well, you know, you can't save all animals. Because she really was trying to, I think, encourage me to become a ballet dancer. So then the next step, I had to get like a private coach.
Wow.
Because I was still going to school at the time. But this private coach, she didn't want to take any more students.
Oh.
So I remember calling her, and then she was like, I'm not taking any more students. And then I'm like, no, but you like have to take me. And like, I just kept like convincing her. And I don't know what I said, but I was kind of like, just do one class with me. And just like see if I'm gonna be, you know,
if I have something.
Yeah, and then if you think it's good, like so I think from a young age I knew how to negotiate.
It's an important skill for life.
You know, for me it was like, okay, well I'll show you what I can do, and if you don't think I'm good enough or worthy of investment, then that's at least, you know, at least I got that chance. So I did that, and then she became like my regular weekly private. And I'm still, to this day, I'm still in touch with her. She became like a second mother to me.
Wow.
So my parents constantly on the sideline were like, okay, you can do ballet, but you have to keep your school grades up. So then I did that.
Taiwanese parents.
Yeah, so then I kept my school grades up. And then like, you can do ballet if you like get a scholarship. And then I would get scholarships at my school.
That's
and
cool,
then
though.
they said, okay, you can do ballet, but then you have to get a part-time job. So at like the age of 12, I started delivering newspapers. Then I started working at a bakery, and then I started working at a clothing store. So all this while I was doing ballet and then high school at that stage.
You were always working and training and studying. And
yeah, truly. Like in high school, I didn't really have much. I didn't go to parties.
I was going to say you probably didn't have a boyfriend in high school. You
ballet was my boyfriend.
I was going to say you wouldn't. Oh, that's. I love that you just said ballet was my boyfriend.
And then I need to go to full-time training. And but I'm at the age where like I need to be finishing off my last year of high school. You know, they wanted me to go to university, and then I'm like, I want to be a ballerina. And my parents were like, oh my goodness.
They're Taiwanese. I'm sorry.
Yeah.
Culturally, they probably wanted you to be a lawyer or a doctor or some sort of professional.
Sure.
Because that's stable, and
Yes,
then you have a stable
yes.
income.
Well, my dad wanted me to be a doctor, and I loved biology. Like I found it fascinating. But then as I fell more in love with ballet, you know, I'm like, I don't want to be in med school. So then it came to the point where I wanted to go full-time training, and my parents were like, okay, you can, but you have to get a scholarship.
Well, I kind of like respect your parents a little bit too, though, because it forced you. Like you had to be tough about this. It was the only way you were gonna make it. Maybe it was tough love on their part, is what I'm saying.
And honestly, looking back, like thank goodness. But then it's like to go to full-time training, I had to forego my last year of high school.
Ooh. And you...
Well, I got a scholarship.
Got a scholarship.
Yeah. So I got
to
Australia to go train in Sydney for a year.
Okay.
And my parents like were not thrilled.
So how old are you at this point? You're 18?
Like 17, and then that would have been 18 years old. I stayed with a homestay family, and I don't have like the happiest memories in Australia because it was a very, obviously a huge transition for me. I became quite obsessed with how I was eating, which is a very normal process for, I think, young girls. You're looking in the mirror every single day.
Your body needs to look a certain way.
And you also get critiqued by, you know, your teachers. And at that point, I kind of like started to control more of my eating. I became quite skinny at a certain stage. In Australia, the one I went to, it wasn't one that like led to a professional ballet company.
Oh, okay.
So the next step would be to get a ballet contract. And they also have big professional schools in Europe and America. Europe, like that's kind of the dream where you want to go when you want to be a professional ballet dancer, because typically every European city has like a huge opera house, and it's state funded. Arts are very important in Europe. And so I convinced my parents that I would go to and do an audition tour, like a 1-month audition tour.
This is after Australia.
After Australia, okay. And they said like, if you don't get a job, you got to come back home.
From Australia, you were traveling around Europe.
Yeah, by myself.
You got a job in Europe?
Well, then I went on this audition tour, and I went to these different places, and I realized, okay, I still needed a bit more full-time training. I auditioned in different schools, and then I ended up in Munich. My dad was very against it, and also my grandparents were like, oh my goodness, what's happening with this child? And my mom was the one that really advocated for me, even though she knew that this wasn't the best path for me.
Well, mom is always a mom, right?
I mean, she wanted me to be happy, and you know, even though my dad didn't want me to do ballet, he was picking me up from ballet class. And then I went to Munich, and Munich has a really good company and a very good school. And through my director in Australia, I was able to do like a 1-day audition. Yeah. And so then I got a place in the school. Like the school director, she was like, you know, you can start. And I was like, I really want to start in the school. But my parents are like, no job.
It was an expensive school.
Back home. No, it wasn't, but it was just like the deal was you were supposed to get a job. If you don't get a job, you were coming back home. And I was just like, I want to stay. And then I was just like, I'm going to stay. And then obviously parents were not thrilled. So I remember like calling up like a couple of my friends. I was like, will you sponsor me? They were my age, so like it's not like we had like massive life savings. Yeah. But like my ballet teacher supported me like a little bit. And then eventually my parents came around. They're like, all right, she's not budging. So then they let me stay like a semester. And fortunately for me, this ballet school was linked to a university in Munich, and meant that I would get a diploma, which is not a diploma, but it's like a very specialized bachelor degree.
Cool.
So I actually got a little white piece of paper. And then in my final year, I got injured.
Oh, which is probably Not uncommon.
I always was reminded that I was going to have a short career.
So what did you do?
So I just like decided I'm going to quit after graduating.
Damn, after all of that.
After all of the phone calls.
Oh my God.
Everything.
Was that a hard decision for you to make?
It was, because I wanted to stay in Germany. I knew if I didn't get a job, it was like shipping K home. So when I got injured, I started like networking. I was like, I need to just meet people. And I remember talking to this creative director, and he's like, well, if you want to stay in Germany, just stay. And I was like, will you give me a job? And he was like, well, do you have a resume? And I was like, yeah. And so I just like whipped out the one that I had from high school with all my like part-time jobs. So I just like convinced him to give me this job, to give me, no, not even a job, like just like a 2-week internship thing. But at this time, I was supposed to fly back to New Zealand.
Oh.
And my parents were furious. My dad didn't talk to me for like 6 months, understandably. And then after these 2 weeks, there was still no guarantee. And then it became a traineeship. And because I was quite good with like people and communication, I started to pitch the creative director for like gigs and get him press opportunities. So really boosting up his profile. So then I became a full-time person after that. And there was a woman that that my boss was actually dating. I became very good friends with her, and she lived in Berlin. And so I was like venturing to Berlin to visit her, and then I was like, I love Berlin.
And then you ended up in Berlin.
To the point where I was like in Berlin every other weekend.
Oh.
And then I wanted to move to Berlin, and then I just was like, I'm gonna quit, and I'm gonna move to Berlin. And I don't think my boss was too happy at the time.
No, of course not.
And when I landed in Berlin, I was like, I want to work for a music recording company.
But you also had no experience.
No experience, absolutely none. And no business being in there. But because I didn't speak German, it was not so easy for me to get into that field. But I found a job to work for a PR and marketing agency. They had a brand called Monster Products. They designed the first Beats by Dre headphones.
Wow. And
they were working with like fashion brands. I worked a lot in PR and events. I don't necessarily enjoy PR and events. It's very stressful. I was going to go to Frankfurt to work at the MTV Music Awards. And I was like backstage, there was like David Hasselhoff, Black Eyed Peas was there, a ton of other celebrities just walking, because we had a backstage booth where they could customize your headphones. So after this company, I went back to Munich. And the agency I worked for before became this architectural consulting firm, working like kind of an account manager, project manager. And then at that time, I had a friend, a good friend of mine, her mother was working for like one of the biggest nonprofits in ballet. And she was heading the team in Japan. And so she said, would you want to come back to ballet? And I was like, no, I do not want to go back. And I was really kind of a bit scarred because of how my dance ended. To get injured and then stop.
At the worst possible time.
Yeah, especially at the peak of should be your career. Yeah. And so then she was like, do you want to come work for this like project in Paris? And I was like, okay, I mean, I guess I could help out. And then I went there, and it was essentially like hosting these ballet competitions to give scholarships to and job contracts to these like talented dancers.
In Paris.
Yes, and they were hosting this European regional in Paris.
Wow.
And so then after that, I made a really good impression on the founder, on the artistic director. And then long story short, she offered me a job in New York. And I had always wanted to go to New York City. And then I was in the States for about a year and a half, 2 years. And I was in a different American city every week.
Cool.
It was exhausting.
I mean, exhausting, but like interesting, I mean.
And at that point, I was like, I don't want to do events anymore. It's very stressful. And I don't want to do the constant traveling. It was really taxing on me, and I was always sick. And so I was just like, I don't want to do it anymore. And then I just decided, okay, I want to do Pivot Point, and I took time to do like research and development so essentially I wanted to create a career transition program. Throughout my career, I had lots of dancers ask me like, how did you do it? Because my career transition is not normal. So I had to design something that's really going to cater to all that, all those nuances. Yeah, and so then I wanted to stay in America, but again, the visa issue, and so I couldn't. So then I flew back to New Zealand when it expired, and then COVID hit, and that's how I came back to Taiwan.
Stay tuned for part 2 of this interview. I hope you have a wonderful morning, afternoon, or evening wherever you are, and I will see you in the next one.